Okay, we're going to go through the next set of quotes in the letter B from the Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes book by me, P. Rogers. We're starting out with an Argentinian writer, Jorge Luis Borges, and then we're going to get into John Boyd will probably be the highlight of today. Okay, so Borges says, all that happens to us, including our humiliations, our misfortunes, our embarrassments, they're all raw material for our writing, like clay that we use to shape our art. And I think that's true, that if you want to be a writer someday, keep a journal of interesting events in your life, because when you feel the emotions, when you and a girlfriend split or whatever it is, you'll be able to capture them more accurately. And collect quotes from all over the place. When you read a book, summarize it in a word processor file. I summarize tons of books, tons of quotes, thousands and thousands of pages of quotes. Okay, it's nice to have that available. I know that they pop up and they're useful for, when I give a talk. They just catch the mood. Okay, Borges continues, if I were asked to name a chief event in my life, I should say my father's library. Yeah, that's one of the best things a father could do, is give a son an example of being a hard worker as a role model and also being a reader. Because if you read, you can read your way out of a lot of problems. I mean, there are a lot of problems too. You can't fix the reading, but there are a lot that you can. Okay, Borges continues, the microscope and the telescope are extensions of sight. The telephone is an extension of voice. The book is an extension of memory and imagination. Yep. Okay, when writers die, they become their books, which is, after all, not too bad of an incarnation. The original is unfaithful to the translation. That's two bald men fighting over a comb. It's easier to remember verse than prose. Regular verse is, so to speak, portable. Yeah, so Cicero had said that too. If you want to make the most important part of your case, you should make it into a rhyme. Rhyme is like a magnet for the ear. And everybody remembers the O.J. Simpson trial. If the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. So the rhyme, it really sticks, okay? Okay, here's a quote by a guy named George Borrow. He says, every dog has his day, and mine has been a fine one. Dion Boucicault, he said, men talk of killing time when it is time that kills them. Paul Bourget, ideas are to literature what light is to painting. George Box, now this is a very useful quote. All models are wrong, but some are useful. Yeah, so you always got to have a little bit of a grain of salt and be ready to add to the model, but, they get you farther along, closer to the truth. All of these metaphors and stuff, they approach truth asymptotically. They never fully get there, but they keep on getting you closer and closer. George Box, just as the ability to devise simple but evocative models is the signature of a great scientist, so over-elaboration, over-parameterization is often the mark of mediocrity. Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Like if you talk to a bullshit artist, they'll say, in order to understand medical papers, you really need to know statistics well. You got to have a general clue about statistics, but you need to know who's funding it. That's a million times more important. And a really good scientist will often write in a metaphor, in a story, an allusion, in an allegory. It'll make sense. And so will their ideas. Versus all the BS artists have all this statistical, fuss, and their papers are worthless. I mean, if they have to make their argument based on playing with statistics, then they really don't have anything. Okay, here's a quote by Arthur Schopenhauer related to the work of what George Box just said. To use many words to communicate few thoughts is the unmistakable sign of mediocrity. To gather much weight and much thought into a few words stamps the man of genius. So I always do that. Like when I write an email, I try to make it, sometimes I'm super busy, but I mean when I have a moment of time, I try to make it as concise as possible. When I dictate my medical reports, I always try to use some good sentence structure. For example, I use embodied simulation. I say the concrete subject first and then describe what happens to it. Like if I was going to say, there was no evidence of a neoplasm in the liver, that's confusing. You don't even know what I'm talking about until I say liver. So why not say liver with no evidence of neoplasm? That's embodied simulation, giving the concrete subject first. What I'm trying to say is if you constantly pay attention to quality writing while you're doing all kinds of minuscule stuff, sending emails or trivial things you do for your job, then when you need to actually write something that you care about it more, you'll be able to do so clearly. So good writing is a habit. Okay, Yeah, and if you just get in the habit of doing things well, then it's natural to do them well. All right, anyways, here's John Boyd. He's the most interesting guy today. He lived from 1927 to 1997. He was a brilliant fighter pilot around the time of the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and he was an aviation engineer. He went and just taught himself aviation because he wanted to be able to be involved in more sophisticated design of fighter jets, for example. Okay, and here's some of his quotes. I read like 3 biographies of him. I love this guy. I thought he was so interesting. He says, whoever can adapt to change faster wins. The goal of an individual in learning is to increase their capacity for independent action. So I like these guys who start out poor, nobody helps them, and they just figure stuff out on their own. You know, because basically that's what I am. You know, guy, don't get me wrong, my parents were both very nice and wonderful to me, but I basically don't have any connections. I don't get anybody help me out, so I have to figure things out on my own. So I like guys, you know, like Cicero. He came from nothing and became the head consul of Rome, the Roman emperor of his time, so to speak. And John Boyd, you know, became this superstar, you know, colonel in complex aviation design, strategy, and stuff. So the guy was a genius. When you study him, you'll be amazed at him. And when he's funny, he would read constantly all day long for days on end. And then he'd figure something out, and he'd be all excited, and he'd call his friends up. And he would often call his friends up late in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. And they hated that, but they loved the fact that he came up with so many brilliant things. He's also the guy who said, look, in life, lots of institutions are basically corrupt, and you have to make a choice. You either choose to do something good or you choose to have a big high title. If you're going to get that title, you're going to have to kiss butt and be a conformist, and you'll never achieve anything worthwhile or interesting. But you'll have the title and the money, so that's nice, okay? On the other hand, though, if you really want to achieve something, it burns inside of you that you want to achieve something good, you're probably going to get ostracized and hassled, and it's just kind of how it goes. Okay, now here's one of the authors of the biographies of Boyd. He said, Boyd thought by analogy, a process that his friend, ever the pragmatist, found extremely unsettling. He found it even more unsettling that Boyd was always right. Okay, John Boyd. If you want to understand things, take it out to extremes or examine the opposite. And that's what I told you about a lot of these nutrition phonies. All you got to do is look at what they're saying, and you'll see giant contradictions in it. And when there's a giant, obvious, major contradiction, then they're bullshitting you. Okay? All right. Yeah, let's see. Always ask yourself, too, could the opposite be true? That helps you to figure out complicated things. Because I spent a long time trying to figure out really complicated things that I would just study and read, 6 months on end, day after day, trying to, break open the problem. Why is this such and such a way? And Boyd helped me to do that. I felt after I read Boyd's books, I got smarter. What are some of the other things? Turn the situation around backwards. Ask yourself, if you did to someone else what they did to you, how would you feel? This can help you figure out social situations. When somebody does something to you that doesn't seem right, just turn it around, and then all of a sudden it'll make sense. A lot of times it's because they don't like you, or they're jealous of you, they're resentful of you, whatever. Okay. Boyd continues, consider every concept, every perspective from every possible angle. Throw the topic to colleagues for discussion. I found that very helpful. When I got an idea and I'm kind of wrestling with it and I can't quite get a hold of it, I run it by some of my friends, some other doctor buddies, and very often they'll hit on the key point. And then once they've done that, then I'll get it, or at least I'll know what I have to read next. Plus, once I figure something out, I like to call one of my doctor buddies, because I know from a lot of experience, as soon as I have a conversation about it, it helps my brain to file that information away more accurately. And I just have it. If I only figure it out and then I get busy doing stuff and I don't do anything else, I might lose that information. But also, if I got a pen and paper, I will write it down. I'll write it down on a note card somewhere. Like, I'll write notes to myself. And that'll summarize it. That'll make sure I look at it later. I'll throw those note cards in a pile, and I'll go back and read about them sometime later in the week when I get some free time. But I also like to have that conversation, because quite often, too, the person will have a little reflection point idea about it. And again, that'll get me to see it more clearly. From experience, I know this works. These are the habits that have helped me the most. Boyd describes a strategic 3-part thinking process. Construction is the first part. Construction involves building a theoretical model of reality. The second part is destruction, and throws away the parts of the old model that are shown to be incorrect or out of date. The third part is synthesis, which involves combining other domains to create something new and better. Okay, that's not that great of an explanation, but it's called the OODA loop. You could even look it up, OODA loop. From John Boyd. But that was basically his idea, that you constantly are observing and you have a working model of reality. But you keep on taking in that new information, and when it contradicts your old model of reality, you make a new one. And you have to be ready to keep on adapting quickly to any type of change. And that ability to adapt quickly, that makes you a more powerful thinker. So anyways, I learned a lot from John Boyd. I hope you found that interesting.